She overheard her billionaire CEO husband's shocking betrayal. She pretended and went back to bed. The next morning, she secretly took her daughter and left. 5 years later. You took everything from me. Everett's voice was low, dangerous, as he cornered Astrid against the wall of the empty corridor, far from the glittering charity gala. His expensive cologne, once so familiar, now made her stomach turn. 5 years. Astrid. 5 years of searching, wondering if my daughter was even alive. Astrid lifted her chin, refusing to be intimidated despite the hammering of her heart. I took nothing that wasn't already mine. Our daughter, my freedom, my life. My daughter, he corrected, his gray eyes cold as steel. And don't pretend this was about freedom. You heard one conversation, misunderstood everything, and disappeared like a thief in the night. A bitter laugh escaped her lips. Misunderstood? I heard you and Thea planning to frame me for corporate espionage. I heard you admit our entire marriage was a business acquisition to get my family's patents. She stepped closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. I heard you say you'd make sure I never saw Linnea again. Something flickered across his face, surprise, perhaps, or calculation. You have no idea what was really happening that night. I know exactly what was happening. You were revealing your true self, Everett. She straightened her shoulders, the emerald dress she purchased at a consignment shop, a stark contrast to the designer gowns surrounding them. And now you've found us. What are you going to do? Destroy everything I've built, just like you planned 5 years ago. His hand shot out, not to grab her, but to brace against the wall beside her head. Where is she? Where is my daughter? Safe. Loved. Far from you, in whatever game you're playing. Astrid ducked under his arm, creating distance between them. Stay away from us, Everett. I have nothing you want anymore. You have everything I want, he replied, his voice suddenly hollow with an emotion she couldn't quite name. And I will get her back, Astrid. Whatever it takes. As she walked away, the weight of his stare burning into her back, Astrid knew her carefully constructed new life had just begun to crumble. 5 years of hiding, of rebuilding, of creating safety for herself and Linnea, all threatened by a chance encounter at a gala she'd never wanted to attend. The question wasn't if Everett would come for them, but when, and this time, she wouldn't be able to simply disappear. Have you ever discovered that your entire life was built on a lie? That the person who vowed to love and protect you was actually your greatest threat? This is the story of Astrid Harlow, a woman who fled with her daughter in the dead of night after discovering her husband's shocking betrayal, only to face him again, 5 years later, more determined than ever to reclaim what she took from him. If you've ever had to choose between comfort and truth, between security and freedom, then you know the impossible decision Astrid faced. Like this video and subscribe to find out how far one mother will go to protect her child from the man who once promised to love them both forever. 5 years. Earlier. The muted voices drifting from Everett's home office pulled Astrid from a restless sleep. She glanced at the bedside clock, 2:17 a.m., and frowned. Her husband rarely worked this late, even with the upcoming merger that had consumed his attention for months. The bedroom felt cold despite the luxurious duvet, the Manhattan skyline glittering through floor-to-ceiling windows that never quite felt like home despite 3 years of marriage. Slipping from bed, Astrid reached for her silk robe, a birthday gift from Everett that probably cost more than her entire wardrobe before she'd married into wealth. The plush carpet silenced her footsteps as she moved down the hallway of their penthouse, drawn to the sliver of light, escaping from beneath Everett's office door. Can't take any chances. Not with this much at stake. Thea Winter's voice, sharp and efficient as always. As Keller Technologies CFO, Thea had been a constant presence throughout their marriage. Her sleek blonde ambition, a perfect complement to Everett's ruthless vision. The board is already asking questions about the patent transfers. We need a distraction, something significant enough to overshadow everything else. Everett's voice now, with the cool calculation that had built his tech empire from nothing. Astrid hesitated, her hand hovering near the door. She'd never been one to eavesdrop, had always respected Everett's privacy, his need for space to run his company without her interference. But something in their tones, an urgency, a secrecy that seemed aimed at more than just business, kept her frozen in place. The evidence is nearly ready. Thea continued. Emails, server access logs, everything points to corporate espionage. Once we present it to the board, they'll have no choice but to take action. What is the grossum? And Astrid? Will she suspect anything? The sound of her own name sent a chill down Astrid's spine. She pressed closer to the door, suddenly desperate to catch every word. "She's oblivious," Thea replied with obvious disdain, too busy with her charity work and mothering to notice what's happening right under her nose. By the time she realizes, it'll be too late. The evidence against her will be overwhelming. Evidence against her? Astrid's mind raced, trying to make sense of what she was hearing. Evidence of what? "It's almost poetic," Everett said, and Astrid could hear the smile in his voice, not the warm one he showed to her and Linnea, but the shark-like grin he reserved for vanquished competitors. Marrying the daughter of Harlow Innovations to acquire their neural interface patents, then discrediting her just in time for the Nexus merger. The board will insist she be removed from everything, the company, the foundation. They'll practically beg me to file for divorce. "And custody of Linnea?" Thea asked. "Full custody, obviously. Can't have a corporate spy raising the Keller heir. Besides, the child is more useful with me. Maintains the family image without the inconvenience of the wife." The words struck Astrid like physical blows, each one shattering another piece of what she believed was her life. The marriage she thought was based on love, a calculated business move. The husband she trusted, her would-be destroyer. The father of her child, a man who viewed their daughter as a useful accessory. "To think she actually believed you fell in love with her," Thea said with a laugh that sliced through Astrid's last desperate hope that she'd misunderstood. "Though you always were convincing, Everett. Even I almost believed you at the wedding." "The things we do for business," Everett replied dismissively. "The Harlow patents were worth every dinner date, every pretend romantic gesture. And to be fair, she made it easy. So eager to believe someone like me could fall for someone like her." Someone like her. The words echoed in Astrid's mind. The awkward tech developer who'd inherited her father's company and patents after his unexpected death. Who'd never quite fit into the sleek, aggressive world of tech giants. Who'd been so pathetically grateful when brilliant, handsome Everett Keller had pursued her with such apparent devotion. "When do we move?" Thea asked, her voice shifting to business efficiency. "Friday. The board meets at 10. By noon, security will be escorting Astrid from the building. I've already spoken with my attorneys about the divorce and custody arrangements. 3 days. They plan to destroy her in 3 days." Astrid backed away from the door, careful to make no sound as the conversation shifted to technical details of their plan. With mechanical precision, she returned to their bedroom, slipped off her robe, and got back into bed, her mind racing even as her body remained perfectly still. When Everett finally came to bed an hour later, she regulated her breathing, pretending to be asleep as he settled beside her. The man she'd shared a bed with for 3 years, the father of her child. A stranger who had just revealed himself to be her enemy. As the first light of dawn filtered through the windows, Astrid made her decision. She wouldn't confront him, wouldn't demand explanations, or beg for mercy. She would protect herself and, more importantly, protect Linnea, which meant she needed to disappear before Friday. "Mommy, can I have chocolate chips in my pancakes?" 4-year-old Linnea's voice carried through the penthouse as Astrid methodically packed a small backpack, hiding it behind Linnea's favorite stuffed animals. "Of course, sweetheart. Just a few, though. Remember what happened last time you had too much chocolate at breakfast?" Astrid kept her voice light, normal, as she'd been doing all morning. Everett had left early for a breakfast meeting, kissing her cheek with the same practiced affection she now recognized as completely hollow. "I got so excited that Miss Francis had to make me sit in the calm corner at preschool." Linnea giggled, clearly not traumatized by the experience. "Exactly." Astrid emerged from the bedroom, smiling at her daughter, as if her entire world wasn't imploding. Linnea sat at the kitchen island, swinging her legs, dark curls still mussed from sleep. She had Everett's eyes, a fact that had once filled Astrid with joy and now sent a pang of fear through her heart. Would he use those shared genes to track them down? To claim what he saw as his property? As she prepared breakfast, Astrid ran through her mental checklist again. Cash withdrawn in small amounts over the past months, a habit she'd started after her father's death had left her temporarily penniless while accounts were frozen. Emergency passports kept in her personal safe, along with her grandmother's jewelry, untraceable assets Everett didn't know about. The burner phone purchased weeks ago when she'd first noticed Thea's increasingly secretive meetings with Everett, when suspicion had begun to gnaw at her subconscious. "Is Daddy coming home for dinner?" Linnea asked, mouthful of pancake. Astrid's hand stilled momentarily over the sink. No, sweetie. Daddy has a big work meeting. He'll be home late. Too late for bedtime stories? Yes, too late for that. Astrid turned, studying her daughter's face, memorizing every detail. How much would change before Linnea saw her father again? Would she even remember him clearly? The thought sent a fresh wave of guilt through Astrid. Despite everything, Everett had been a loving father, or had appeared to be. Was she wrong to take Linnea away from him? Then she remembered his cold voice. The child is more useful with me. Not loved, not cherished. Useful. How about we do something special today? Astrid suggested, forcing brightness into her voice. Skip preschool and have an adventure? Linnea's eyes widened with delight at this unprecedented suggestion from her rule-following mother. Really? Can we go to the zoo? Or the carousel in the park? Better than that, Astrid said, already texting Linnea's preschool about a sudden family emergency. We're going on a trip. Just you and me. Where to? It's a surprise. Astrid smiled, ignoring the knot of fear in her stomach. Now, quick. Let's pack your backpack with your very most favorite things. But only what fits in the backpack, okay? It's a special adventure rule. As Linnea raced off to her room, Astrid sent one more text to their housekeeper, letting her know they'd be away for a few days for a girls' trip and not to worry about coming in. Then she erased the message history, powering down her regular phone and slipping the burner into her pocket. They were out of the building by 9:30 a.m., Linnea chattering excitedly about their mysterious adventure, Astrid nodding and responding while her mind calculated their next steps. Not the private car service Everett would be able to trace. Not her credit cards or anything linked to her name. They took the subway to Grand Central Station, then a train heading north along the Hudson. It wasn't until they were an hour outside the city that Astrid allowed herself to breathe. By the time Everett realized they were gone, they would be halfway to their destination, a small coastal town where her college roommate had once invited her to visit. A place Everett didn't know about, had never heard her mention. A place they could disappear while she figured out their next move. Mommy, when is Daddy joining our adventure? Linnea asked as she colored in the activity book Astrid had packed. Astrid swallowed hard, the first of many difficult conversations looming before her. Daddy has to work, sweetheart. This adventure is just for us girls. But we'll see him when we go home, right? Home. The penthouse that had never truly felt like one, for all its luxury and spectacular views. The place where she'd heard her husband calmly planning to destroy her. Linnea, she said gently, turning her daughter to face her. I need you to listen very carefully. We're going to be staying in our new special place for a while. Daddy won't be with us. But you and I will be together, and that's what matters most. Confusion clouded Linnea's small face. But why can't Daddy come too? How could she explain corporate espionage, betrayal, and calculated cruelty to a 4-year-old? How could she tell Linnea that the father she adored saw her as nothing more than a useful accessory to his corporate image? Sometimes, Astrid began carefully, grown-ups need to take different paths. Daddy's path is in New York, with his company. Our path is going somewhere new, where we can build something special together. But I want Daddy too. Linnea's lower lip trembled. I know, sweetheart. Astrid pulled her close, breathing in the sweet scent of her hair, fighting back her own tears. I know you do. And maybe someday, when you're older, you'll understand better. But for now, I need you to trust me. Can you do that? Can you be my brave adventure girl? Linnea nodded against her shoulder, not fully understanding but responding to the urgency in her mother's voice. I'm brave, she whispered. The bravest, Astrid agreed, her heart breaking as she stroked her daughter's hair. The very bravest girl I know. As the train carried them farther from Manhattan, from Everett, from the life she thought was real, Astrid made a silent promise to her daughter. Somehow, she would build them a new life. A real one, based on truth rather than calculation. And she would protect Linnea from the man who saw her only as a useful asset in his corporate empire, whatever it took. The first few months in Cedar Cove were the hardest. The small coastal town 3 hours north of New York City was exactly as Astrid remembered from her one brief visit years ago, picturesque, quiet, and mercifully uninterested in newcomers. But building a life from scratch, with limited resources and a heartbroken 4-year-old, tested every ounce of Astrid's resolve. They rented a tiny cottage on the outskirts of town, using cash and the fake ID Astrid had acquired through channels she'd rather forget. Wren Morgan, her new identity, crafted from her middle name and her mother's maiden name. Linnea became Linnea Morgan, a small enough change that the child could adapt without confusion. But why can't I be Linnea Keller anymore? She'd asked, bewildered by this strange new rule. Because we're playing a special game, Astrid had explained, hating the lie but seeing no alternative. Like spies in your storybooks. We have secret names now. The cottage had one bedroom, which Astrid gave to Linnea, making her own bed on the pull-out sofa in the living room. Their landlord, an elderly man named Orion Hayes who owned the local bookshop, asked few questions beyond whether they could pay the modest rent. His kind eyes had taken in Astrid's tense shoulders, Linnea's confused sadness, and he'd simply handed over the keys with a gentle, "Welcome to Cedar Cove. People come here to heal. I hope you find what you're looking for." Finding work proved harder. Astrid had been a brilliant developer before her marriage, but using those skills risked detection. Any formal employment would require documentation she couldn't provide without alerting Everett. Instead, she started small, offering basic computer repair services to local businesses, building websites for shops still operating in the digital dark ages. All cash transactions under her new identity. It wasn't until she helped the local medical clinic recover data after a ransomware attack that her reputation began to grow. Dr. Mei Lin, impressed by Astrid's skills, became her champion, recommending her to colleagues and friends. Within 6 months, Rin Morgan had established herself as a competent, discreet cybersecurity consultant who worked remotely for clients who didn't ask too many questions. The cottage slowly transformed into a home. Secondhand furniture, carefully chosen for comfort rather than style. Walls covered with Linnea's artwork and photos of their new life. A small vegetable garden in the back where they spent weekend mornings digging in the dirt, Linnea's initial resistance to their adventure, gradually giving way to moments of genuine joy. But nights were the hardest. After Linnea fell asleep, often crying for the father she missed and the life she didn't understand why they'd left, Astrid would sit at her laptop, scanning news about Keller Technologies, about Everett, about the life they'd fled. The story had broken exactly as she'd expected. 2 days after their disappearance, business publications reported allegations of corporate espionage at Keller Technologies, with unnamed sources suggesting the CEO's wife might be involved. A week later came the announcement that Astrid Harlow Keller was being investigated for attempting to sell proprietary technology to competitors. No mention that she was missing, that Linnea was gone. Just the carefully crafted narrative Everett and Thea had planned. Then, 3 weeks after they'd arrived in Cedar Cove, the story changed. Reports emerged that Astrid Keller and her daughter were missing, possibly abducted. Everett appeared on national news, his handsome face grave with worry, pleading for information about his beloved wife and child. A substantial reward was offered. The sympathetic interviewer noted how the CEO was balancing his concern for his missing family with the corporate espionage investigation, such a burden for one man to bear. Beloved wife, Astrid had muttered to her laptop screen, watching his performance with grim fascination. You calculating bastard. She'd expected him to spin the situation to his advantage, but the abduction angle surprised her. It complicated her plans, made any eventual emergence more difficult. If she ever came forward, she'd be painted not just as a corporate spy, but as a manipulative woman who had faked a kidnapping, who had stolen a father's child. 1 year turned into 2. Linnea started kindergarten at the local elementary school, made friends, stopped asking when they were going home to daddy. Astrid's consulting business grew steadily, with clients spread across 3 states, all handled remotely, all paying into untraceable accounts. They established routines, traditions, a life that began to feel solid despite its foundation of secrets and false identities. Orion Hayes became more than just their landlord. The childless widower developed a grandfatherly affection for Linnea, letting her help in his bookshop after school, slipping her new releases of her favorite series, teaching her to play chess on rainy afternoons. With Astrid, he maintained a respectful distance, never pressing for details about their past but offering quiet friendship that gradually earned her trust. You know, he said one evening as they sat on the cottage porch, watching Linnea chase fireflies in the garden. In my experience, the things we run from have a way of finding us eventually. Astrid tensed, her hand tightening around her teacup. What makes you think I'm running from something? Orion's weathered face creased in a gentle smile. My dear, no one comes to a town like Cedar Cove with a young child and no connections unless they're seeking refuge. I'm not asking for your story. just suggesting that whatever it is, facing it on your terms might be better than being caught unaware. Some things can't be faced, Astrid replied, her eyes following Linnea's delighted movements in the gathering dusk. Some people can't be reasoned with. Perhaps. Orion nodded thoughtfully. But secrets are heavy burdens, especially when carried alone. Remember that you have friends here now. Friends who would stand with you, if needed. The simple offer of alliance brought unexpected tears to Astrid's eyes. After years of looking over her shoulder, of trusting no one completely, the idea of having people on her side felt almost foreign. "Thank you," she said softly. "That means more than you know." As Cedar Cove settled into their third autumn, the national interest in the missing Kellers faded. Occasional anniversary stories would appear, with updated photos of Everett looking appropriately haunted by his loss while continuing to lead his company to ever greater success. The Nexus merger had gone through, just as he'd planned. Keller Technologies had expanded into new markets, acquired smaller competitors, grown into one of the dominant forces in the industry. And Thea Winters had been promoted to COO, her sleek blonde ambition rewarded exactly as she'd wanted. Sometimes, in her darkest moments, Astrid wondered if she'd overreacted, if she'd misunderstood that late-night conversation, if there might have been an explanation that didn't involve Everett betraying her so completely. But then she would remember the cold calculation in his voice, the casual cruelty of the child is more useful with me, and her resolve would harden once more. By the 5th year of their new life, Cedar Cove had truly become home. Their cottage, purchased with the proceeds from Astrid's now thriving consultancy, had been expanded and renovated. Linnea, at 9, was a bright, confident third grader who loved science and art in equal measure. The nightmares about being taken away from her mother had mostly stopped. The questions about her father had evolved from tearful, "Why can't I see Daddy?" to more thoughtful inquiries about what kind of person he had been. Astrid answered as honestly as she could without burdening Linnea with the ugly truth. "Your father is very smart and determined. He runs a big technology company. You have his eyes and his talent for chess. But why did we leave him? Was he mean to us?" "It's complicated, Linny. He and I had different ideas about our future. Sometimes adults can't find a way to compromise, and it's better to make a clean break. Not the whole truth, but not entirely a lie, and enough to satisfy Linnea for now." Their life had found its rhythm. Astrid's business allowed her flexibility to be home when Linnea returned from school. Weekends were filled with community events, play dates, trips to nearby beaches or museums. They had friends, real friends who knew them as Wren and Linnea Morgan, who accepted them without probing too deeply into their past. It wasn't the life Astrid had imagined for herself or her daughter, but it was genuine in a way her marriage to Everett never had been. Here in Cedar Cove, they were loved for themselves, not for what they could provide or how useful they might be to someone's ambitions. Which was why, when the invitation arrived from CyberShield Solutions to attend their annual Client Appreciation Gala in Boston, Astrid's first instinct was to decline. Large events in major cities carried risk. Her altered appearance, hair cut short and dyed a rich auburn instead of her natural blonde, contacts changing her blue eyes to hazel, had served her well in their small town. But would it hold up under the scrutiny of a high-profile gathering? "You should go," urged Mei Lin over coffee at the local cafe. "CyberShield is your biggest client. Turning down their invitation could raise questions you don't want asked." "It's just one night," Astrid countered. "I'll plead a scheduling conflict." "For the 3rd year running? Wren, you've built an impressive reputation in this industry while maintaining your privacy. That's a delicate balance. Sometimes, showing your face is part of maintaining it." May's logic was sound, as always. And Boston wasn't New York. The chances of encountering anyone from her past were minimal. With Linnea safely staying with Orion for the weekend, perhaps it was worth the calculated risk. "Fine," Astrid sighed. "One night. In and out. Minimum networking, maximum client maintenance." "We're something fabulous," May advised with a grin. "I hear the tech security crowd really knows how to party." The emerald dress was an impulse purchase, far more elegant than anything she'd bought since leaving Manhattan. Its understated sophistication reminded Astrid of who she had been before, not the trophy wife Everett had cultivated, but the confident innovator her father had raised her to be. Standing before the mirror in her Boston hotel room, she barely recognized herself. 5 years had changed her in ways beyond the deliberate alterations to her appearance. The woman looking back at her was stronger, more centered, her eyes clear with purpose rather than clouded by insecurity. The gala was being held at the Sinclair Hotel, a recently renovated historic landmark in downtown Boston. As Astrid entered the grand ballroom, she felt a momentary disorientation. The glittering chandeliers, the elegant crowd, the subtle displays of wealth, all so reminiscent of the life she'd left behind. She accepted a glass of champagne from a passing waiter, scanning the room for her client contact while maintaining the calm smile she perfected over years of professional networking. Ren Morgan. The booming voice of Howard Chen, CyberShield's founder, cut through her thoughts. The mysterious genius herself. I was taking bets on whether you'd actually show up this year. Astrid turned, her smile warming with genuine affection for the straightforward entrepreneur who had become her most valued client. Howard. Lovely event. Thank you for the invitation. You're too kind. It's corporate obligation dressed up with decent wine. Howard grinned, lowering his voice conspiratorially. Though the real excitement is our special guest. Managed to snag Everett Keller to give a brief address on the future of integrated security systems. Quite the coup for our little company. The champagne flute nearly slipped from Astrid's suddenly numb fingers. Everett Keller? Of Keller Technologies? The one and only. His company's been making aggressive moves into the security sector. Rumor has it they're looking at potential acquisitions. Howard glanced at his watch. He should be arriving any minute. I'll introduce you. Might be good for your consultancy to have connections at that level. Actually, I'm feeling a bit lightheaded, Astrid said, already calculating the quickest exit route. I think I need some air. Excuse me. She set down her glass and moved toward the terrace doors, heart pounding against her ribs. 5 years of careful anonymity, of building a life where Everett couldn't find them, and now she had walked directly into his path. The universe's sense of irony was truly spectacular. The terrace was blissfully empty, the October evening just cool enough to deter most guests from venturing outside. Astrid gripped the stone balustrade, forcing herself to breathe evenly. To think. She could leave now, make her apologies to Howard tomorrow with some excuse about sudden illness. She could be back in Cedar Cove by morning, and Everett would never know how close he'd come to finding them. Miss Morgan? Howard asked me to check if you're all right. The unfamiliar female voice made Astrid turn, relief washing over her at the sight of a young server, rather than her client. Yes, thank you. Just needed some fresh air. Please tell him, I'm fine. The server nodded and retreated, leaving Astrid alone once more. She took one last deep breath of the crisp autumn air, straightened her shoulders, and headed for the exit. No goodbye, no explanation. Just a clean escape before disaster could strike. She had almost reached the ballroom doors when the crowd near the entrance parted, creating a pathway for the event's special guest. Even from a distance, Everett commanded attention. His tall frame, impeccably suited as always, moved with the easy confidence of a man accustomed to deference. His dark hair was now touched with distinguished silver at the temples, but otherwise, he looked remarkably unchanged, handsome, powerful, completely in control. Beside him walked Thea Winters, her hand resting possessively on his arm, diamonds glittering at her throat and ears. The perfect corporate power couple, exactly as they'd planned to be 5 years ago. Astrid froze, momentarily paralyzed by the sight of them. In her shock, she failed to notice Howard Chen breaking away from the greeting party, moving toward her with obvious intent to make the introduction he'd promised. Ren, there you are. Come meet our guest of honor. Before she could protest, before she could fabricate another excuse, Howard was guiding her forward, directly into Everett's path. The collision of past and present happened in slow motion, like watching an inevitable car crash unfold. Mr. Keller, allow me to introduce one of our most valued security consultants, Ren Morgan. Ren, this is Everett Keller, CEO of Keller Technologies, and his fiancée, Thea Winters, the company's COO. In fact, if work, fiancé, the word registered dimly through Astrid's panic. So they had finally formalized the partnership they'd been planning all along. Everett extended his hand automatically, the practiced smile of a man making obligatory small talk already in place. Then his eyes met hers, and the smile froze, recognition dawning like a slow-breaking wave. Astrid? The name escaped him in a shocked whisper. Thea's head snapped toward her, blue eyes widening with disbelief before narrowing in calculation. Howard looked between them in confusion. I'm sorry, do you already know each other? Excuse me, Astrid managed, backing away from Everett's outstretched hand as if it might burn her. I'm not feeling well. I need to leave. I need. She turned and walked away with measured steps, fighting the urge to run, to flee as she had 5 years ago. Behind her, she could hear Howard's confused apologies, Thea's murmured response, and then, most terrifying of all, Everett's firm voice, "Please excuse me for a moment." The hotel's elegant corridor stretched before her, each step taking her closer to the exit, to escape, to the life she built from the ashes of his betrayal. But she knew, with cold certainty, that she wouldn't make it. Not this time. "Astrid, stop." His voice, closer than she'd expected, made her freeze despite herself. Years of conditioning, of responding to that commanding tone, betrayed her in this crucial moment. "You took everything from me." Everett's voice was low, dangerous, as he cornered Astrid against the wall of the empty corridor, far from the glittering charity gala. His expensive cologne, once so familiar, now made her stomach turn. 5 years, Astrid. 5 years of searching, wondering if my daughter was even alive. Astrid lifted her chin, refusing to be intimidated despite the hammering of her heart. "I took nothing that wasn't already mine. Our daughter, my freedom, my life." "My daughter," he corrected, his gray eyes cold as steel. "And don't pretend this was about freedom. You heard one conversation, misunderstood everything, and disappeared like a thief in the night." A bitter laugh escaped her lips. "Misunderstood? I heard you and Thea planning to frame me for corporate espionage. I heard you admit our entire marriage was a business acquisition to get my family's patents." She stepped closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. "I heard you say you'd make sure I never saw Linnea again." Something flickered across his face, surprise, perhaps, or calculation. "You have no idea what was really happening that night." "I know exactly what was happening. You were revealing your true self, Everett." She straightened her shoulders, the emerald dress she'd purchased at a consignment shop, a stark contrast to the designer gowns surrounding them. "And now you've found us. What are you going to do? Destroy everything I've built, just like you planned 5 years ago?" His hand shot out, not to grab her but to brace against the wall beside her head. "Where is she? Where is my daughter?" "Safe. Loved. Far from you, and whatever game you're playing." Astrid ducked under his arm, creating distance between them. "Stay away from us, Everett. I have nothing you want anymore." "You have everything I want," he replied, his voice suddenly hollow with an emotion she couldn't quite name. "And I will get her back, Astrid. Whatever it takes." As she walked away, the weight of his stare burning into her back, Astrid knew her carefully constructed new life had just begun to crumble. 5 years of hiding, of rebuilding, of creating safety for herself, and Linnea, all threatened by a chance encounter at a gala she'd never wanted to attend. The question wasn't if Everett would come for them, but when. And this time, she wouldn't be able to simply disappear. The drive back to Cedar Cove was a blur of mounting anxiety and frantic planning. Astrid had checked out of her Boston hotel immediately, not even bothering to collect her meager belongings, and driven through the night to reach home. By the time she pulled into the driveway of their cottage, dawn was breaking over the Atlantic, casting long shadows across the garden Linnea had helped plant. Her hand shook as she unlocked the front door. Inside, the house was quiet, still. Linnea would be at Orion's, safe in the guest room he'd decorated especially for her occasional overnight stays. But for how much longer would anywhere be safe? Now that Everett had found her, what would his next move be? Astrid moved through the cottage methodically, gathering essential documents, emergency cash, the go-bag she'd always kept ready, despite years of relative security. The rational part of her mind knew running again was probably futile. Everett had resources she couldn't match, determination, fueled by 5 years of searching. But the instinct to flee, to protect Linnea from the man who saw her only as a useful asset, overrode all logical considerations. She was stuffing clothes into a duffel bag when her burner phone rang, the number only 3 people had. Her stomach clenched as she answered. "Orion? Is everything all right?" "Everything's fine," the elderly bookseller assured her. "Linnea's still asleep. I just wanted to check if you'd made it back from Boston yet. You sounded concerned when you called last night." Concerned. A mild word for the barely controlled panic she'd felt while explaining she needed to return immediately, asking Orion to keep Linnea until she arrived. "I'm home," she confirmed. "Thank you for taking care of her." "Of course." A pause, then, "Rin, whatever's happening, you're not alone in this. You know that, right?" The simple statement nearly broke her composure. After years of self-reliance, of trusting no one completely with their situation, Orion's quiet support was almost too much to bear. "I know," she managed, "but this is complicated. Most important things are." His voice remained steady, grounding. "Would it help to talk about it? Over coffee, perhaps, once Linnea's had her breakfast?" Astrid hesitated. The habit of secrecy was deeply ingrained after 5 years of careful vigilance. But Orion had proven his trustworthiness time and again. And she was desperately in need of advice, of perspective beyond her own fear-driven thoughts. "Coffee would be good," she agreed finally, "but not at the cafe, somewhere private." "My place, then. I'll make pancakes for Linnea, and we can talk while she reads in the garden." 2 hours later, seated in Orion's book-lined study while Linnea explored his extensive collection of botanical guides on the back porch, Astrid finally shared the truth. Not all of it. Some details were still too painful, too private, but enough for him to understand the gravity of their situation. "So this man, your ex-husband, is a powerful CEO who's been searching for you and Linnea for 5 years. Orion summarized, his weathered hands wrapped around a coffee mug. "And now he's found you." "Yes," Astrid stared into her own untouched coffee. "And he'll come for her. I have no doubt about that." "Because he loves his daughter?" The question, asked with such genuine curiosity rather than judgment, made Astrid look up sharply. "Because she's his property, his heir, useful to his corporate image." "Those are cold motivations for a 5-year search," Orion observed mildly. "Everett Keller is a cold man. Everything is business to him. Our entire marriage was just a transaction to acquire my family's technology patents. And yet he spent considerable resources looking for you both. Maintained a public search long after most would have given up. That suggests something beyond mere business interest." Astrid shook her head, frustrated by Orion's apparent devil's advocacy. "You don't understand who he is, what he's capable of. I heard him planning to frame me for corporate espionage, to take Linnea away permanently. His exact words were that the child is more useful with me." "A terrible thing to say," Orion acknowledged. "Unforgivable, perhaps. But people can change in 5 years, Ren. Or should I call you Astrid now?" "Ren is fine. It's who I am now." She set down her mug with a decisive click. "And Everett doesn't change. He calculates, adapts, finds the most advantageous position. But his core remains the same, cold, strategic, ruthless when necessary." "Then why are we having this conversation?" Orion asked gently. "If you're so certain of his nature and intentions, why haven't you already fled with Linnea? Why seek my advice at all?" The question struck at the heart of her uncertainty. "Because running worked once, when he wasn't expecting it. I don't think it will work again. He has resources I can't match, networks I can't evade. And Linnea," she swallowed hard. "Linnea has a life here. Friends, school, stability. I don't want to tear her away from everything familiar a second time. So what are your options?" "I don't know." Astrid ran a hand through her short auburn hair, a gesture of frustration she developed since cutting off the long blonde waves Everett had admired. "Fight him legally? He has teams of attorneys and fabricated evidence of corporate espionage against me. Reason with him? He doesn't respond to emotional appeals, only strategic advantage. Run again? He'd find us eventually, and the pattern would just repeat." Orion was silent for a long moment, his kind eyes thoughtful as he considered her dilemma. "Perhaps," he said finally, "the answer lies not in what you do, but in what you know." "What I know?" "You heard a conversation 5 years ago that led you to believe your husband planned to destroy you. But you left before seeing those plans enacted. What if there were details you missed? Context you didn't have? Information that might change how you approach this confrontation?" Astrid shook her head emphatically. "I know what I heard." "Yes, but do you know what happened next? After you disappeared? How did it affect their plans, their relationship, their actions over these 5 years?" The questions gave her pause. She'd followed news about Keller Technologies, about the corporate espionage allegations that had indeed emerged as planned. She'd seen Everett's public appeals for information about his missing wife and daughter. But the inner workings of what had happened after her disappearance, how it had affected their carefully laid plans, remained a mystery. "Knowledge is power, my dear," Orion continued, refilling her coffee cup. "Before you decide your next move, perhaps you should gather more intelligence about your adversary's current position. 1. How? I can hardly walk into Keller Technologies and ask for an update on their plans to frame me. A smile creased Orion's face. No, but you are a highly skilled cybersecurity consultant with access to networks and information channels most people couldn't navigate. And you have friends who might have connections you don't. Astrid considered this, a plan beginning to form in her mind. You're right. Before I make any decisions, I need more information. About Everett's current situation, about what happened to their original plan, about what resources he might bring to bear against me now. And while you gather that intelligence, Linnea can stay here with me. This cottage has been in my family for generations, quite secure, with an excellent security system installed by a talented consultant I know. Orion winked, lightening the moment. No one would think to look for her in the home of an elderly bookseller. Relief washed over Astrid at this simple, practical solution. A temporary safety measure, while she gathered the information she needed to make a more permanent plan. Thank you, Orion. I don't know how I'll ever repay your kindness. You already have, my dear. You and Linnea brought life back to this old house, gave an isolated widower something to look forward to each day. He reached across the table to pat her hand. Family takes care of family, even when they're not related by blood. Family. The word caught in Astrid's throat. In fleeing the false family Everett had constructed for his corporate convenience, she and Linnea had found a real one, built on genuine affection, mutual support, and trust rather than calculation and advantage. Whatever came next, whatever Everett planned to do now that he'd found them, Astrid knew one thing with absolute certainty: she wasn't alone this time. And that made all the difference in the world. Have you ever discovered that someone you trusted completely was playing a different game entirely? That the life you thought you were building together was just a strategic move in their larger plan? If you've ever had to choose between comfortable lies and difficult truths, hit that like button and subscribe for more stories about the courage it takes to start over. In part 2, we'll see what happens when Everett begins his campaign to reclaim what he believes is his, and the unexpected allies Astrid finds in her fight to protect the life she's built. Comment below if you think Astrid made the right choice in taking Linnea and disappearing, or if she should have confronted Everett with what she heard that night. The first sign that Everett was making his move came 3 days after the Boston Gala. Astrid had just dropped Linnea at school, maintaining normal routines while quietly gathering information, when her phone buzzed with a text from Mei Lin. There's a man asking questions about you at the clinic. Corporate type, expensive suit, claims to be old friend looking to reconnect. Astrid's fingers tightened around her phone. It had begun, exactly as she'd feared. Not Everett himself, he was too strategic for that, but his advanced team, gathering intelligence, confirming her identity, preparing the ground for whatever he planned next. By the time she reached her cottage, 3 more messages had arrived from different friends reporting similar inquiries around town. The hardware store owner, the barista at her favorite cafe, even Linnea's art teacher. Cedar Cove's close-knit community, normally a comfort, now meant word of these unusual questions would spread quickly. People would talk, make connections, perhaps mention them to Linnea before Astrid could prepare her. She was weighing her options when a sharp knock at the door made her freeze. Too soon for Everett's legal team. Too direct for his usual subtle approach. With cautious steps, she moved to the window, peering through the curtains at her unexpected visitor. The man on her porch was vaguely familiar, tall, broad-shouldered, with the alert posture of someone accustomed to assessing threats. Not one of the anonymous corporate investigators she'd spotted around town, but someone she'd seen before, in another life. It took her a moment to place him. Callum Reed, Everett's former head of security, a quiet, watchful presence at company events during her marriage. Astrid hesitated, instinct warring with curiosity. Callum had always been professional, respectful, one of the few at Keller Technologies who had treated her as more than just the CEO's decorative wife. But his loyalty had been to Everett, hadn't it? The decision was made for her when Callum spoke through the door, his deep voice pitched low enough that only she would hear. Mrs. Keller, Astrid, please. I'm alone. I'm not here on his behalf. The formal address, the one she hadn't used in 5 years, sent a chill down her spine. But there was something in his tone, urgency, perhaps, or sincerity, that compelled her to open the door a cautious few inches, security chain still in place. How did you find me? She demanded without preamble. Callum's weathered face revealed nothing. I've been looking for 3 years. Not for him, for myself. Why should I believe that? Because Everett Keller fired me 6 months after you disappeared, when I refused to falsify security footage that would have supported the espionage allegations against you. He met her gaze directly. And because I have information you need if you're going to protect yourself and your daughter. Astrid studied him for a long moment, weighing the risk against the potential value of whatever he knew. Finally, she closed the door, removed the chain, and reopened it. You have 10 minutes. And if this is some kind of trap, remember that I've spent 5 years learning how to disappear. I can do it again. Callum nodded, following her into the small living room with measured steps. He remained standing, respecting her unspoken desire to maintain distance, control. Everett will file for emergency custody of Linnea within the next 48 hours. He began without preamble. The paperwork is already prepared. His legal team has been on standby for years, waiting for this moment. 1. Astrid felt the blood drain from her face. On what grounds? Parental abduction. Emotional instability. Fabricated evidence suggesting you're an unfit mother. Callum's expression remained neutral, professional, as he delivered this devastating news. They've built a compelling case, Astrid. One that most family courts would find persuasive, especially against a woman who's been living under a false identity. How do you know all this? I still have contacts at Keller Technologies. People who owe me favors or disagree with Everett's methods but need their paychecks. He paused, then added, and I've been monitoring certain encrypted communications since I left the company. Old habits. Astrid sank onto the sofa, mind racing. Why are you telling me this? What's your angle? Let's just say I have personal reasons for wanting to see Everett Keller face consequences for his actions. And I believe in protecting children from power struggles between adults. Callum reached into his jacket, extracting a small flash drive which he placed on the coffee table between them. This contains evidence of the original conspiracy against you. Security footage, email exchanges between Everett and Thea, audio recordings from meetings you weren't aware were happening in your own home. Astrid stared at the unassuming device, afraid to touch it yet desperate to know its contents. Why didn't you come forward with this 5 years ago? I didn't have it all then, and frankly, you disappeared so completely I couldn't find you. A hint of professional admiration colored his voice. You did an impressive job covering your tracks. Not impressive enough, apparently. No one stays hidden forever. Not from someone with Everett's resources and motivation. Callum glanced at his watch. Your 10 minutes are nearly up. I'll leave you to review the files. There's contact information for me in there as well, if you have questions or need assistance. As he moved toward the door, Astrid found her voice again. Why did he fire you? Really? Callum paused, something complicated flickering across his stoic features. Because I told him his plan to frame his wife for corporate espionage, while his 4-year-old daughter slept down the hall was reprehensible. And because I suspected there was more to the story than he and Thea were sharing with the security team. He met her gaze directly. For what it's worth, I don't think Everett anticipated how far Thea was willing to go. Not that it excuses his part in it. After he left, Astrid sat motionless, staring at the flash drive as if it might explode. In a way, she feared it might, destroying the certainty that had guided her actions for 5 years. The clear narrative of betrayal that had justified taking Linnea away from her father. When she finally plugged it into her laptop, the contents were exactly as Callum had described. Security footage showing Thea accessing Astrid's computer late at night, weeks before the conversation she'd overheard. Email exchanges discussing the contingency plan if Astrid became problematic during the merger negotiations. And most damning of all, audio recordings from the hidden security system in Everett's home office, including the full conversation from that fateful night, not just the portion Astrid had overheard. The board is already asking questions about the patent transfers. We need a distraction, something significant enough to overshadow everything else. The evidence is nearly ready. Emails, server access logs. Everything points to corporate espionage. Once we present it to the board, they'll have no choice but to take action. And Astrid? Will she suspect anything? She's oblivious. Too busy with her charity work and mothering to notice what's happening right under her nose. By the time she realizes, it'll be too late. The evidence against her will be overwhelming. It's almost poetic. Marrying the daughter of Harlow Innovations to acquire their neural interface patents, then discrediting her just in time for the Nexus merger. The board will insist she be removed from everything, the company, the foundation. They'll practically beg me to file for divorce. In custody of Linnea? Full custody, obviously. Can't have a corporate spy raising the Keller heir. Besides, the child is more useful with me. Maintains the family image without the inconvenience of the wife. To think she actually believed you fell in love with her. The things we do for business. The Harlow patents were worth every dinner date, every pretend romantic gesture. And to be fair, she made it easy. So eager to believe someone like me could fall for someone like her. So far, everything matched Astrid's memory perfectly. But the recording continued, capturing what she hadn't stayed to hear. When do we move? Friday. The board meets at 10. By noon, security will be escorting Astrid from the building. I've already spoken with my attorneys about the divorce and custody arrangements. There was a pause, the sound of ice clinking in a glass. Then Everett's voice again, but with a shift in tone Astrid couldn't quite identify. Speaking of attorneys, Andrews raised some concerns about the custody strategy. Said the courts are unlikely to grant full custody without clear evidence of maternal unfitness, even with the espionage allegations. That's why we have the psychological evaluation, the one showing her increasingly erratic behavior and concerning attachment issues with Linnea. The evaluation based on edited security footage and statements from staff who've been incentivized to support our narrative. Everett's voice held a note Astrid had never heard before, hesitation, perhaps, or something like concern. It feels excessive, Thea. The espionage charges are one thing, business is business. But using Linnea as a bargaining chip. Getting squeamish, Everett? Need I remind you what's at stake here? The Nexus merger hinges on exclusive control of the Harlow patents. Patents that legally still include Astrid's name, despite your careful prenup. Patents that could end up contested in a standard divorce unless we have leverage. There are other ways to handle the patents. Legal ways. Legal ways that take time we don't have. The merger deadline is non-negotiable, and Astrid has started asking questions about the patent transfer documents you had her sign last year. She mentioned consulting her own attorney to better understand her rights within the company. Astrid's breath caught. She had indeed consulted an attorney, privately. After noticing discrepancies in patent documentation, Everett had assured her were standard legal formalities. But she told no one about that meeting, not even her assistant. You've been monitoring her calls. Everett's voice was flat, a statement rather than a question. Of course I have, just as you authorized in the security protocol after the Westfield data breach. Though I notice you didn't object to that surveillance when it provided useful intelligence about the Richardson negotiation. Another pause, longer this time. Then, Everett again, his voice hardening into something more familiar, the ruthless CEO making a business decision. Proceed with the plan as outlined, but I want Callum to review all the evidence before it goes to the board. And I want your assurance that once we have what we need, the more extreme measures against Astrid will be unnecessary. Always the sentimentalist beneath that cold exterior. Thea's laugh held no warmth. Fine. Once the patents are secured and the merger completed, you can be as generous as you like in the divorce settlement. Play the magnanimous ex-husband, if it makes you feel better. As long as we get what we need first. The recording ended there, leaving Astrid staring at her laptop screen, her certainty fractured but not destroyed. Yes, Everett had shown a moment of hesitation about using their daughter as leverage. Yes, he'd expressed some reservations about Thea's more extreme tactics. But he had still agreed to the plan. Still prioritized the business over their marriage, over Linnea's well-being. Still revealed that their entire relationship had been a calculated business acquisition. The other files on the drive provided additional context, evidence that Thea had been the primary architect of the espionage frame-up, that she had manipulated certain security protocols without Everett's knowledge, that her ambition extended beyond what even Everett had initially approved. But none of it exonerated him. None of it changed the fundamental betrayal at the heart of their marriage. What it did provide, however, was leverage. Concrete evidence she could use if Everett pursued legal action to reclaim custody of Linnea. Proof that the original espionage allegations had been fabricated, that their marriage had been entered into under false pretenses, that Linnea had been viewed as a strategic asset rather than a beloved child. As she closed the laptop, Astrid's phone chimed with a text from Orion. Linnea's doing homework at my shop after school. Take your time. The simple message, with its implicit understanding that she needed space to process whatever Callum had shared, brought unexpected tears to her eyes. In the midst of this unfolding crisis, she wasn't alone. She had allies, friends, a community that would stand with her against Everett's wealth and power. She was still sitting there, mind racing with potential strategies, when another text arrived, this one from an unknown number. The message was brief, formal, and sent ice through her veins. Miss Harlow, a legal matter concerning your daughter requires urgent attention. Please contact Blackwell and Associates at your earliest convenience to avoid additional complications. It had begun, exactly as Callum had warned. The legal machinery of Everett Keller's retribution, set in motion after 5 years of searching. And Astrid had less than 48 hours to prepare her defense. The law offices of Morris and Chen occupied a modest building in downtown Portland, their practical approach to family law, a deliberate contrast to the gleaming corporate firms Astrid had known in her previous life. Elena Chen, the partner who had agreed to see Astrid on emergency notice, was a sharp-eyed woman in her 50s whose no-nonsense demeanor had immediately put Astrid at ease. "Let me be clear about where we stand," Elena said, reviewing the documents Astrid had provided, including copies of key files from Callum's flash drive. "Your ex-husband has significant advantages in any custody battle. His resources are practically unlimited. He can claim you abducted your daughter and assumed a false identity. And technically, he'd be correct." "I had cause," Astrid insisted. The evidence shows a complicated corporate conspiracy that most family court judges won't fully understand or consider relevant." Elena interrupted gently. "What matters is that you took your daughter and disappeared for 5 years, denying her father any contact." Astrid's stomach clenched. "So you're saying I'll lose her?" "I'm saying we need to be strategic." Elena leaned forward, her expression intent. "Mr. Keller has filed for emergency temporary custody, claiming you're a flight risk, which, given your history, is a reasonable concern from the court's perspective. The hearing is scheduled for tomorrow morning." "Tomorrow? That's impossible. I need time to prepare." Emergency hearings move quickly, especially with high-profile parties involved. Judge Rollins has a reputation for efficiency. Elena's tone softened slightly. "But she's also known for prioritizing children's well-being over parental rights. That's where we focus our strategy." "How?" "By demonstrating that abruptly removing Linnea from her stable environment would be traumatic and unnecessary. By showing you've created a secure, loving home where she's thriving. And by presenting evidence that raises serious questions about Mr. Keller's motives and methods." Astrid nodded slowly, processing this approach. "And the espionage allegations? The false identity?" "We addressed them head-on. You fled because you genuinely believed your husband was framing you for corporate crimes and planning to take your daughter away permanently. Your actions, while extreme, were taken out of maternal protection, not malice." Elena closed the folder decisively. "Now, tell me everything about Linnea's life in Cedar Cove. Her school, her friends, her activities. Every detail that shows she's flourishing in the life you've built." As Astrid described their 5 years in the coastal town, Linnea's excellent academic record, her art awards, her close friendships, her volunteer work at Orion's bookshop, she felt a growing certainty that they had created something worth fighting for. Not just a hiding place, but a genuine home where Linnea had been able to develop into a confident, compassionate child, despite the secrets surrounding her early years. "One more question," Elena said when Astrid finished, her expression carefully neutral. "Has Linnea had any contact with her father during these 5 years? Letters, phone calls, emails, anything?" "Of course not. I've been careful to." Astrid stopped, registering something in Elena's tone that sent alarm bells ringing. "Why? Do you have reason to think there's been contact?" Elena hesitated, then turned her laptop to show a document from Everett's legal filing. "This is part of their evidence. Screenshots of online conversations between Linnea and someone she refers to as chess friend. The messages date back approximately 6 months." Astrid scanned the images with growing horror. The conversation seemed innocent enough on the surface, discussions about chess strategies, books they both enjoyed, science topics Linnea found interesting. But certain details jumped out with sickening clarity, references to New York that could only come from someone who knew Linnea had lived there as a young child. Questions about her daily routine that could help track their location, subtle probes about her relationship with her mother. "I had no idea," Astrid whispered, feeling physically ill. "She has a tablet for schoolwork, but it's monitored. At least, I thought it was." Children are remarkably resourceful with technology, especially bright ones like your daughter appears to be. Elena's voice held no judgment, only practical concern. The question is how these communications began, and what we tell the judge about them. I need to talk to Linnea, Astrid said, rising abruptly. I need to understand what happened, what she knows. Carefully, Elena cautioned. Whatever you discover, remember that she's a child caught between parents. Her perspective and emotional well-being need to be protected, even as we prepare for tomorrow's hearing. The drive back to Cedar Cove passed in a blur of anxiety and betrayal. Had Linnea been secretly communicating with Everett all these months? Had she somehow found him online, or had he found her? And what had she told him about their life, their location, their daily routines? Orion's bookshop was quiet when Astrid arrived, the afternoon lull leaving only a few browsing customers among the tall shelves. Linnea sat at her usual table in the children's section. Homework spread before her, dark curls falling across her face in a gesture so reminiscent of Everett that Astrid's heart clenched. Mom. Linnea looked up with a smile that faded as she registered Astrid's expression. Is something wrong? We need to talk, sweetheart. In private. Astrid kept her voice gentle, despite the turmoil inside. Can you pack up your things? Linnea complied. Her movements suddenly careful, measured, another unconscious echo of her father that Astrid had never noticed before. They said goodbye to Orion, who squeezed Astrid's shoulder in silent support, and walked the short distance to their cottage in uncomfortable silence. Once inside, Astrid sat Linnea at the kitchen table, taking a moment to prepare hot chocolate, a family tradition for difficult conversations since Linnea was small. The familiar ritual gave her time to organize her thoughts, to find words that wouldn't frighten or accuse. Linnea, she began finally, setting steaming mugs before them. I need to ask you something important, and I need you to be completely honest with me, even if you think I might be upset by the answer. Linnea's fingers tightened around her mug. Is this about chess, friend? The direct question took Astrid by surprise. Yes. How did you know? Because you have that look. The one you get when you're worried about something to do with our old life. Linnea met her gaze steadily, suddenly seeming older than her 9 years. And because Miss Chin's office called Orion to ask about my online activities. He didn't tell me exactly what they wanted, but I could guess. Astrid took a deep breath. Who is Chess friend, Linnea? A long pause. Then, he says he's my dad. Despite having suspected this answer, hearing it spoken aloud sent a wave of dizziness through Astrid. When did this start? How did he find you? 6 months ago, after the online chess tournament at school. Linnea's voice was small but steady. I used my real name, Linnea Keller, because it was an official competition. He saw it on the results page and sent me a message through the platform. And you responded? Without telling me? I was curious. Linnea's chin lifted slightly, another gesture so like Everett's that it was almost painful to witness. You never tell me anything real about him. Just that he was smart and determined and ran a technology company. I wanted to know more. Astrid swallowed hard, fighting back the instinctive panic. What did he tell you about himself? About why we left? He said you had a misunderstanding. That he never wanted us to leave, that he's been looking for us ever since. Linnea hesitated, then added, he said he loves me and misses me every day. The simple statement, delivered with a child's unquestioning acceptance, cut deeper than any accusation. Had Everett used those exact words? Had he meant them? Or was this just another strategic move in his campaign to reclaim what he saw as his property? Why didn't you tell me about these conversations? Astrid asked, keeping her voice carefully neutral. Linnea studied her hot chocolate, avoiding Astrid's gaze. Because I knew you'd make me stop. And because, she trailed off. Uncertainty, replacing her earlier confidence. Because what, sweetheart? Because sometimes you get a sad, scared look when I ask about Dad. Like you're afraid of something. And I didn't want to make you afraid. Linnea looked up, her eyes, Everett's eyes, bright with unshed tears. I just wanted to know who he was. If he remembered me. If he ever thought about me. Astrid moved around the table, pulling Linnea into a tight embrace. Oh, Linny. Of course he thinks about you. How could anyone who knew you ever forget you? 1. As she held her daughter, Astrid's mind raced with implications. Linnea had been communicating with Everett for months. He had been gathering information, building a relationship, preparing for this moment while Astrid remained oblivious. And tomorrow, A judge would decide if that secret connection justified emergency custody. Am I in trouble? Linnea asked, her voice muffled against Astrid's shoulder. No, sweetheart. Not with me. Astrid pulled back, brushing hair from Linnea's face with gentle fingers. But there's something important I need to tell you. Your father is here, in Cedar Cove. He's filed legal papers, asking for custody. Linnea's eyes widened. He's here? Now? Can I see him? The eagerness in her voice sent a stab of fear through Astrid's heart. It's complicated, Linne. There's going to be a court hearing tomorrow where a judge will decide what happens next. What do you mean? What happens next? Will I have to go with him? Alarm replaced excitement in Linnea's expression. I don't want to leave you. I don't want to leave Cedar Cove. White. I'm going to do everything I can to make sure that doesn't happen, Astrid promised, though the words felt hollow against the legal reality Elena had outlined. But I need you to understand that whatever happens in court, whatever the judge decides, I will always be your mother. I will always love you and protect you. Nothing can change that. Linnea nodded solemnly, processing this with the same thoughtful focus she brought to chess matches and science problems. Does Dad want to take me away from you? The question, direct, perceptive, impossible to evade, hung between them. Astrid had promised herself years ago never to lie to Linnea about important matters, even when the truth was difficult or complicated. She wouldn't start now, with so much at stake. I think he wants what he believes is best for you, she said carefully, but we disagree about what that is. I believe you belong here, in the home we've built together, with your school and friends and the life you know. He believes you should be with him, in his world. But why can't I have both? Why can't I see him sometimes and live with you? Linnea's practical question cut through the adult complications with a child's clarity. That's what Zoe's parents do after their divorce. 1. Astrid hesitated, searching for words that would explain without burdening Linnea with the full complexity of adult betrayal and corporate machinations. Your father and I, we haven't been able to communicate well. To find that kind of compromise. That's why we're going to court, to have someone help us figure out what's fair. Will I have to talk to the judge? Tell them what I want? I don't know yet, sweetheart. But if you do, all you need to do is tell the truth. About your life here, about your conversations with your father, about what would make you happy. I want to stay with you, Linnea said immediately, wrapping her arms around Astrid's waist. But I want to know my dad too. Is that okay? Is it okay to want both? Astrid held her daughter close, fighting back tears. Of course it's okay. It's more than okay. It's completely natural to want to know your father, to have a relationship with him. She swallowed hard, forcing herself to add. And whatever you told him in your messages, whatever questions you answered, that's okay too. You didn't do anything wrong. As Linnea relaxed against her, some of the tension easing from her small shoulders, Astrid made a silent vow. Whatever happened in court tomorrow, whatever legal maneuvers Everett attempted, she would find a way to protect what mattered most, not her pride or her anger or even her legal rights, but Linnea's sense of security and trust in both her parents. Even if that meant facing the man who had planned to destroy her, even if it meant finding a compromise she'd once thought impossible. The Portland courthouse loomed gray and imposing in the morning drizzle, its formal architecture a physical manifestation of the legal system's authority. Astrid gripped Elena Chin's business card like a talisman as she navigated the security check, grateful that Linnea was safely with Orion rather than witnessing this first confrontation. The emergency custody hearing had been scheduled for Judge Rollins's chambers rather than open court, a small mercy that at least kept the proceedings from becoming a public spectacle. As Astrid entered the wood-paneled room, her eyes immediately found Everett, seated beside his attorney at a small conference table. He looked exactly as she remembered from the gala, confident, composed, expensively attired in a suit that probably cost more than her monthly rent. When he saw her, something flickered across his features, recognition, determination, and an emotion she couldn't quite identify. Not the cold calculation she'd expected, but something more complex. Miss Harlow. Judge Rollins nodded as Astrid took her seat across from Everett. And Mr. Keller, thank you both for your punctuality. Given the unusual circumstances of this case, I've reviewed the filings in detail before this hearing. I have several questions for both parties. What followed was an intensive, often uncomfortable examination of the past 5 years. Judge Rollins, a stern-faced woman with penetrating eyes and a no-nonsense manner, directed sharp questions at both Astrid and Everett, cutting through evasions and legal posturing with surgical precision. Miss Harlow, she addressed Astrid directly. You removed your daughter from her home, assumed a false identity, and denied Mr. Keller any knowledge of her whereabouts for 5 years. Please explain why I shouldn't consider this parental abduction. Astrid took a deep breath, focusing on the facts rather than the emotion. Your Honor, I fled with Linnea because I genuinely believed she was in danger. I overheard my then-husband and his business partner planning to frame me for corporate espionage and used the allegations to gain full custody of our daughter. They explicitly discussed using her as a business asset. Judge Rollins turned to Everett. Mr. Keller, your response? Everett met the judge's gaze steadily. The conversation Miss Harlow overheard was taken out of context. Yes, there was discussion of corporate espionage allegations, but they concerned a security breach my CFO believed Miss Harlow might have unwittingly facilitated. The custody discussion was about protecting Linnea during what would likely be a difficult investigation. A convenient interpretation, Judge Rollins observed. Do either of you have evidence supporting your version of events? This was the moment Elena had prepared her for. Astrid nodded to her attorney, who presented the court with selections from Callum's flash drive, carefully chosen excerpts that demonstrated the planned frame-up without revealing Callum as the source. As you can see, Your Honor, Elena explained, these communications clearly show the fabrication of evidence against my client. They corroborate her reasonable fear that Mr. Keller planned to use false allegations to separate her from her daughter. Everett's attorney, a polished woman in her 40s with the sharp demeanor of someone accustomed to winning, leaned forward. Your Honor, these isolated excerpts, presented without context, prove nothing except that Miss Harlow had access to confidential company communications. What they don't explain is why, if she truly feared for her safety, she didn't seek legal protection instead of disappearing with Mr. Keller's child. I believed Everett's resources would overwhelm any legal proceedings. Astrid answered before the judge could pose the question. He controlled the company, the evidence, the narrative, and he had explicitly stated his intention to gain full custody by whatever means necessary. Judge Rollins turned back to Everett. Mr. Keller, these allegations are serious. What is your current intention regarding custody of your daughter? Everett hesitated, his expression carefully controlled. Your Honor, I've spent 5 years searching for my child. 5 years wondering if she was safe, if she was happy, if she even remembered me. Now that I've found her, I want to be her father again, in whatever capacity best serves her well-being. Even if that means something less than the full custody you originally requested in this emergency filing? Even then, Everett's gaze shifted to Astrid, something unreadable in his eyes. My primary concern is Linnea's happiness and stability. I'm willing to work toward an arrangement that acknowledges the life she's built with her mother, while allowing me to rebuild my relationship with her. The apparent reasonableness of this position, so at odds with the ruthless tactics Astrid had expected, caught her off guard. Was this another strategy? A performance for the judge? Or had 5 years of searching for his daughter genuinely shifted Everett's priorities? Judge Rollins seemed equally skeptical. Mr. Keller, your attorney's filing paints Miss Harlow as an unstable individual who abducted your child and has been living under a false identity. Now you suggest you're open to shared custody. Which position accurately reflects your intentions? The emergency filing was prepared based on limited information, Your Honor. Before I saw where and how Linnea has been living. Before I understood that, despite the circumstances, she appears to be thriving in her mother's care. Everett's voice remained steady, controlled. I still believe my daughter was wrongfully taken from me. I still believe I deserve to be part of her life. But I also recognize that abruptly removing her from her current environment would cause unnecessary trauma. Judge Rollins studied him for a long moment, her expression unreadable. And the online communications between you and your daughter over the past 6 months? Hidden from her mother, conducted under the guise of a chess mentor? A decision I regret, Your Honor. Everett had the grace to look genuinely uncomfortable. When I discovered Linnea in that online chess tournament, I could not reach out. It was impulsive, inappropriate, and potentially confusing for her. But I was desperate for any connection to my child. The admission, uncharacteristically emotional for the controlled CEO, brought a new tension to the room. Astrid found herself staring at Everett, searching for signs of manipulation or calculation in his apparent contrition. Judge Rollins turned back to her notes, reviewing them in silence that stretched uncomfortably. When she finally looked up, Her expression was resolute. Here's what we're going to do. The emergency custody request is denied. Linnea will remain in her mother's primary care, while this matter proceeds through standard custody evaluation. Astrid felt a wave of relief so powerful she nearly swayed in her chair. However, the judge continued, her gaze now fixed on Astrid. Mr. Keller will be granted immediate visitation rights. Supervised at first, transitioning to standard alternate weekend arrangements, once the court-appointed evaluator determines appropriate boundaries are being respected by both parties. Your Honor, Elena began, given the history. The history is precisely why we need professional evaluation and supervised transitions. Judge Rollins interrupted firmly. Miss Harlow, regardless of your reasons, you denied your daughter's father any relationship with her for 5 years. Mr. Keller, you engaged in secretive communication with a minor without parental knowledge or consent. Neither of you has demonstrated the judgment or communication skills needed for an unstructured co-parenting arrangement. She closed the file decisively. The first supervised visit will take place this weekend, coordinated by Family Services. Both of you will cooperate fully with the custody evaluator. And both of you will put your daughter's emotional well-being ahead of your personal grievances. Is that understood? Yes, Your Honor. They responded in unison. Outside the judge's chambers, Astrid stood frozen, processing the outcome. They had won the immediate battle. Linnea would stay with her, but the war was far from over. Now began the complex process of reintroducing Everett into their daughter's life, of navigating co-parenting with a man she still didn't trust, of explaining to Linnea why her world was changing yet again. Astrid. Everett's voice behind her made her turn. He had dismissed his attorney, standing alone in the courthouse corridor, his usual commanding presence somehow muted in this moment of uncertain victory for both of them. Could we speak privately? Before the supervised visit this weekend? Every instinct warned against it. Every protective mechanism she developed over 5 years of hiding screamed that this was dangerous, that Everett never made casual requests, that every interaction was strategic. Why? She asked simply. Because there are things you need to know. About what happened after you left. About Thea. About. He hesitated, uncharacteristic uncertainty crossing his features. About why I've spent 5 years looking for you, and Linnea. Astrid studied him, searching for the calculating CEO beneath the veneer of sincerity. The judge ordered us to cooperate for Linnea's sake. That doesn't require private conversations about the past. No, he agreed. But it might help us avoid making the same mistakes going forward. He reached into his jacket, extracting a business card which he held out to her. My hotel. Tomorrow at noon. No attorneys, no agendas. Just truth. Against her better judgment, Astrid took the card, slipping it into her purse without commitment. I'll think about it. As she walked away, she could feel his gaze following her, not predatory, as she'd expected, but weighted with something that felt almost like regret. The Harborview Hotel overlooked Portland's working waterfront, its understated luxury a far cry from the opulent establishments Everett typically frequented. Astrid had spent the night debating whether to meet him at all, finally deciding that understanding his current position would be strategically valuable, whatever her personal reservations. She arrived precisely at noon, determined to maintain control of the encounter. The desk clerk directed her to a private dining room rather than Everett's suite, a public setting that eased some of her anxiety. When she entered, Everett was already there, standing at the window overlooking the harbor, his back to the door. Thank you for coming, he said, without turning, apparently recognizing her footsteps. I wasn't sure you would. I almost didn't. Astrid remained near the door, maintaining distance. What is this about, Everett? What truth is so important that it couldn't wait for the court-mandated meetings? He turned then, and she was struck by the weariness in his expression, a vulnerability she'd rarely seen during their marriage. The truth about why I've been searching for you, and Linnea for 5 years. Not to punish you for leaving, not even primarily for custody, but because I needed to apologize. Astrid's defenses immediately heightened. Apologize? After 5 years of nothing, after secret communications with our daughter, after filing for emergency custody, now you want to apologize? Yes. The simple response caught her off guard. For what you overheard that night. For the person I was then. For the damage I caused to you and to Linnea. I'm in. Why should I believe anything you say? Astrid challenged, fighting the treacherous part of herself that wanted to believe in his apparent sincerity. You're a master manipulator, Everett. Every word, every gesture calculated for maximum effect. Fair assessment. He gestured to the table set for lunch. Please, sit. You don't have to say anything. Just listen. Then decide for yourself if it's truth or manipulation. Against her better judgment, Astrid took a seat, watching as Everett settled across from her. Up close, she could see subtle changes 5 years had wrought, new lines at the corners of his eyes, threads of silver more prominent at his temples, a certain gravity that hadn't been there before. What you heard that night was real, he began without preamble. The plan to frame you for corporate espionage. The cold assessment of our marriage as a business acquisition. The discussion of using Linnea as leverage. All of it happened exactly as you remember. The blunt admission caught Astrid by surprise. She had expected denials, justifications, attempts to reframe the narrative. Not this straightforward confirmation of her worst memories. What you didn't hear, what happened after you left, was the unraveling of everything I thought I wanted. Everett's gaze remained steady, unflinching. When you disappeared with Linnea, the carefully orchestrated plan collapsed. The board demanded explanations, the merger negotiations stalled. And in the chaos, I discovered something I hadn't known. What? That Thea had been playing a deeper game all along. The espionage evidence against you wasn't just about removing you from the company. It was about positioning herself as the indispensable partner who saved Keller Technologies from disaster. Who stepped in when the CEO was distracted by personal tragedy, his mouth twisted in a humorless smile. She'd been methodically undermining me for months, using my focus on the merger to advance her own agenda. And this revelation is supposed to exonerate you somehow? Astrid asked, skepticism evident. Make me forget that you were a willing participant in the plan to destroy me? No, nothing excuses what I agreed to that night. Everett's directness was disarming. But your disappearance forced me to see what I'd become. What I was willing to sacrifice for business success. The kind of father I would have been to Linnea if you hadn't taken her away. He fell silent as a server entered with their first course, resuming only when they were alone again. You want to know why I've been searching for 5 years? Because losing Linnea, wondering every day if she was safe, if she was happy, if she remembered me at all, broke something in me that I didn't know could break. And because I needed to tell you that you were right to leave. The admission hung between them, unprecedented and unsettling. Astrid had prepared for anger, for legal threats, for manipulation. Not for Everett Keller, acknowledging he had been wrong. If you believe that, she said carefully, why file for emergency custody the moment you found us? Fear. The simple answer, delivered without hesitation, carried unexpected weight. Fear that you'd disappear again before I could explain. Fear that another 5 years might pass before I found you. Fear that Linnea would grow up never knowing I'd changed, that I wanted to be the father she deserves. And have you changed? Astrid couldn't keep the skepticism from her voice. I'd like to think so. Everett met her gaze directly. But that's not for me to judge. It's for my actions to demonstrate, over time. To Linnea. And to you, if you're willing to observe with an open mind. Astrid studied him, searching for the calculation beneath the sincerity. What about Thea? The last I heard, she was your fiancée. A shadow crossed Everett's face. Thea Winters is under federal investigation for securities fraud and corporate espionage, the real kind, not the fabricated charges we once discussed. The evidence against her came from internal sources at Keller Technologies. Sources loyal to me. You turned on her. Astrid wasn't sure if this revelation made her more or less inclined to trust his current sincerity, just as you were willing to turn on me 5 years ago. The difference, Everett said quietly, is that Thea actually committed the crime she was planning to frame you for. And unlike 5 years ago, I'm no longer willing to compromise ethical boundaries for business advantage. The meal continued with careful conversation about Linnea, her interests, her academic strengths, her personality traits. Everett listened with genuine attention as Astrid described their daughter's development over the years he'd missed, asking thoughtful questions that suggested real interest rather than perfunctory obligation. By the time dessert arrived, Astrid found herself in the uncomfortable position of recognizing that Everett might indeed have changed in fundamental ways. Not enough to trust him completely, not enough to forget the betrayal that had sent her fleeing into the night 5 years ago. But perhaps enough to consider the possibility of a functional co-parenting relationship for Linnea's sake. The supervised visit is scheduled for Saturday morning, she said as they prepared to leave. At the Family Services Center in Portland. Linnea knows you're her father, that you've been her online chess partner, and that the judge has approved regular visits going forward. How did she take the news? She's excited to see you in person. Nervous too. Astrid hesitated, then added, she wants to know why you didn't come find us sooner, if you've been looking for 5 years. A flash of pain crossed Everett's features. What did you tell her? That finding someone who doesn't want to be found is very difficult. That even with resources, it can take years. Astrid met his gaze directly. I didn't tell her that you were the reason we had to hide in the first place. That's a conversation for when she's older, if ever. Thank you for that. Everett's gratitude seemed genuine. For protecting her from the uglier aspects of our history. I've always protected her, Astrid replied. A reminder of the fundamental truth that had driven her actions for 5 years. And I always will. I know. He held her gaze, something like respect in his expression. It's one of the many things I failed to appreciate about you during our marriage. Your strength, your determination, your absolute commitment to Linea's well-being, whatever the personal cost. The unexpected acknowledgement of her character, her mothering, her sacrifices, caught Astrid off guard. For a moment, she glimpsed the man Linnea might come to know as her father, reflective, emotionally intelligent, capable of recognizing his own failings. So different from the cold strategist who had planned to use their daughter as a business asset. Saturday at 10, she said finally, unwilling to acknowledge the complex emotions his words had stirred. Don't be late. Linnea hates waiting. Like her mother, Everett observed with the ghost of a smile. I remember. As Astrid walked away from the Harborview Hotel, her mind replayed their conversation, searching for manipulation, for hidden agendas, for the calculating businessman beneath the seemingly changed man. But what stayed with her most vividly was the expression in Everett's eyes when he spoke of Linnea, genuine longing, pride, and something that looked remarkably like love. Perhaps people could change, even someone as seemingly immutable as Everett Keller. Perhaps 5 years of searching for his lost daughter had transformed him in ways she hadn't thought possible. Or perhaps this was the most sophisticated manipulation yet, designed to lower her defenses before he made his real move. Time would tell, and for Linnea's sake, Astrid would remain vigilant, protective, unwilling to trust completely until actions had proven words true over months and years, not days. But for the first time since overhearing that devastating conversation 5 years ago, Astrid allowed herself to consider the possibility that Everett might actually have the capacity to be the father Linnea deserved, not perfect, not flawless, but genuine in his love and commitment to their daughter's well-being. It was a small opening in the wall of distrust she'd built, a tentative willingness to observe with the open mind he'd requested, nothing more. But for now, it was enough to move forward, one careful step at a time, into their new reality as reluctant co-parents bound together by the remarkable child they'd created. The Family Services Center's visitation room was designed to be welcoming yet neutral, colorful furnishings, various toys and games, large windows overlooking a small garden. As Astrid helped Linnea choose an outfit that morning, settling on her favorite blue dress with leggings, casual yet special, she'd been surprised by her daughter's focused calm, so different from her usual energetic approach to new experiences. Are you nervous, sweetheart? She'd asked, braiding Linnea's dark hair as requested. A little. Linnea had met her eyes in the mirror, her expression thoughtful. What if he doesn't like the real me as much as the online me? What if I'm not what he expected? The question had caught Astrid by surprise. Not the typical anxiety of a child meeting a parent, but the specific fear of disappointing someone whose approval mattered. Linnea, listen to me. You are extraordinary exactly as you are. If anything, the real you is even more amazing than anyone could capture in online messages. Your father would have to be blind not to see that. 9. Now, watching Linnea sit primly on the edge of a sofa in the visitation room, hands folded in her lap like a miniature adult preparing for a job interview, Astrid felt a renewed surge of protectiveness. Whatever history lay between her and Everett, whatever future custody arrangements the courts might decide, her priority remained unchanged. Linnea's emotional well-being above all else. When Everett entered, precisely on time as always, Astrid observed their daughter's reaction carefully. The initial shyness as Linnea, half rose, uncertain of proper protocol. The flicker of recognition as she connected the man before her with the online chess partner she'd grown to trust. And finally, the tentative smile that transformed her serious expression into something luminous with hope. Hello, Linnea, Everett said, His usual commanding presence gentled into something approaching humility. "It's wonderful to finally meet you in person." "Hello, Dad." Linnea tested the word carefully, watching for his reaction. The effect on Everett was immediate and profound, a visible softening, a brightness in his eyes that might have been unshed tears. "I've waited a very long time to hear you call me that again." "I don't really remember calling you that before," Linnea admitted with her characteristic honesty. "I was too little when we left New York." "I know." Everett moved closer, kneeling to her level rather than towering above her, a gesture that surprised Astrid with its instinctive sensitivity. "But I remember, and I've missed it every day." The supervised visit proceeded with careful conversation, Everett following Linnea's lead as she gradually relaxed enough to show him her latest art project on her tablet, to challenge him to a real chess match instead of their online games, to ask the questions that had clearly been building since she discovered his identity. "Why did you and Mom stop loving each other?" she asked during a quiet moment. The directness that Astrid had always encouraged now turned toward the most complex aspect of their family history. Everett glanced at Astrid, a silent question in his eyes. She nodded slightly, giving him permission to answer, within appropriate boundaries. "Sometimes," he began carefully, "adults can care deeply about each other, but still not be able to build a life together. Your mother and I had different ideas about what was important, different priorities, and I made mistakes, serious ones, that hurt her." "Yeah? What kind of mistakes?" Linnea pressed, ever the investigator. "I put my work ahead of our family. I made decisions without considering how they would affect your mother. I wasn't the husband she deserved, or the father I should have been." Everett's honesty, carefully modulated for a 9-year-old's understanding, but unsparing in its self-assessment, caught Astrid by surprise. "By the time I realized what I was losing, your mother had already decided you both needed a different life." Linnea considered this with her characteristic thoughtfulness. "But you want to be my dad now? A real dad, not just someone I talk to online?" "More than anything in the world. Even if it means coming to Cedar Cove, sometimes instead of us always going to New York, because my friends are here, and my school, and Orion's bookshop where I help on Saturdays." Even then, Everett's smile held genuine warmth. "I can work from anywhere, and I'm rather good at adapting to new circumstances." The visit ended with tentative plans for their next meeting, a less structured outing to a nearby science museum, still supervised but allowing for more natural interaction. As they prepared to leave, Linnea surprised both parents by initiating a hug with Everett, her small arms wrapping around his waist with cautious affection. "I'm glad you found us," she said simply, "even if it's complicated." Watching them, Astrid felt a complex mixture of emotions she couldn't quite name. Relief that the visit had gone well, lingering wariness about Everett's long-term intentions, and something unexpected, a recognition that whatever had driven their marriage apart, whatever corporate machinations had once consumed Everett's focus, his connection with Linnea appeared genuine, his desire to be her father sincere rather than strategic. In the weeks that followed, this impression only strengthened. Everett approached the court-mandated custody evaluation with meticulous cooperation, rented a house in Portland to facilitate regular visits, and demonstrated surprising flexibility in accommodating Linnea's established routines. The corporate titan who had once expected the world to adapt to his schedule, now cheerfully rearranged multi-million-dollar negotiations to attend Linnea's science fair presentation. Most tellingly, he made no attempt to leverage his wealth or status to accelerate the custody process or influence its outcome. When the court-appointed evaluator recommended a gradual transition to shared physical custody, with Linnea's primary residence remaining in Cedar Cove for the school year, Everett accepted the recommendation without protest, focusing instead on making their co-parenting arrangement as smooth as possible for their daughter. "He's not what I expected," Astrid admitted to Orion one evening, 6 months after that first supervised visit. They sat on her cottage porch, watching Linnea and Everett play chess in the garden, their dark heads bent in identical concentration over the board. "He's changed." "People can," Orion observed mildly, "especially when they've had 5 years to reflect on their mistakes. It's more than reflection. It's like he's fundamentally different from the man I married." Astrid couldn't look away from the tableau before her, her daughter and her ex-husband, connected not by obligation but by genuine affection and shared interests. The Everett I knew would never have accepted these custody terms without a fight. Would never have purchased a house in Portland just to be closer to weekend visits. would never have rearranged board meetings to attend elementary school events. Perhaps he's finally recognized what truly matters. Orion's wise eyes tracked the pair in the garden. Or perhaps he always had that capacity within him, but needed to lose everything to discover it. The observation lingered with Astrid, resurfacing later that evening as she and Everett discussed logistics for Linnea's upcoming birthday celebration. They sat at her kitchen table, sharing the co-parenting calendar that had become a fixture of their new routine, while Linnea completed homework in her room. "I was thinking we could host the party here," Astrid suggested, indicating the weekend Everett would normally have Linnea at his Portland house. Her friends are all local, and she's been planning this Harry Potter theme for months. "Of course," Everett agreed without hesitation. "Whatever makes her happiest. I can handle decorations if you'll manage the guest list and activities." The easy cooperation, the absence of power struggles or territorial claims, still surprised Astrid after months of co-parenting. "Thank you for being so flexible about all this." Everett looked up from the calendar, his expression thoughtful. "I learned an expensive lesson 5 years ago, Astrid, about what happens when you try to control everything and everyone around you. When you view relationships as transactions rather than connections. The lesson being? That you lose what matters most." His gaze was direct, unguarded in a way she'd rarely seen during their marriage. "I lost you. I lost Linnea. I lost 5 irreplaceable years of her childhood. No business success, no corporate acquisition, no market dominance was worth that price." And the simple honesty of his assessment, free from manipulation or strategic calculation, caught Astrid by surprise. "The man I married wouldn't have recognized that truth, let alone acknowledged it. The man you married was blinded by ambition and family expectations, convinced that personal feelings were weaknesses to be overcome rather than strengths to be cultivated." Everett's smile held no humor. It took losing everything that actually mattered to recognize how wrong that perspective was. "And Thea? What happened there?" The question had been lingering for months, unasked until this moment of unexpected candor. "Thea Winters was exactly what the old me thought I wanted. Ruthlessly efficient, strategically brilliant, completely aligned with my business objectives." Everett's expression darkened. "And utterly devoid of any moral compass or genuine human connection. When you disappeared with Linnea, she saw it as an opportunity to consolidate her position in the company rather than a personal tragedy. Yet you still plan to marry her, as recently as 6 months ago. A business arrangement that made sense on paper. Continuation of a partnership that had survived your departure and the collapse of our original plan." Everett met her gaze directly. "But no, Astrid, I was never going to marry Thea Winters. The engagement was a strategic move to stabilize company perception during a volatile acquisition period. It would have been quietly dissolved once the deal closed. Just like our marriage was a strategic move to acquire my family's patents." Astrid couldn't help the edge in her voice, the lingering hurt beneath years of careful rebuilding. "No." The single word hung between them, weighted with unexpected emotion. "Our marriage began as a strategic move, yes. I pursued you initially because of the Harlow patents, because my father insisted no technology company could compete in the neural interface space without them. But somewhere along the way, something changed." "What?" "I changed. Or rather, I began to change." Everett's expression held a vulnerability she'd never witnessed during their marriage. "I found myself enjoying your company beyond its business utility, admiring your insight, your quiet confidence, your unwavering commitment to ethical innovation. By the time Linnea was born, the strategic motivation had become secondary. Yet you were still willing to frame me for corporate espionage, to take Linnea away permanently." Astrid couldn't reconcile this claimed affection with the cold calculation she'd overheard that night. "Because I was still fundamentally broken," Everett acknowledged without excuses. "Still capable of compartmentalizing my personal feelings when necessary for business objectives. Still my father's son, prioritizing corporate success above all else." He met her gaze directly. "It's the deepest regret of my life, Astrid. Not because it cost me my company's reputation or financial position, but because it cost me you and Linnea. Because it revealed a fundamental flaw in my character that I've spent 5 years trying to correct." The raw honesty in his voice, the absence of the careful calculation that had once defined their interactions, left Astrid momentarily speechless. Was this the real Everett, finally emerging from beneath layers of corporate armor and family conditioning? or the most sophisticated manipulation yet, designed to lower her last defenses. Before she could respond, Linnea appeared in the doorway, pajama-clad and sleepy-eyed. "I finished my homework. Can we have hot chocolate before Dad leaves? The special kind with cinnamon?" The simple request, the casual inclusion of both parents in a family ritual, created a moment of domestic normality that felt both strange and oddly right. As they moved to the kitchen, Everett easily finding mugs and ingredients as if he'd been part of their household routine for years rather than months, Astrid found herself observing him with new eyes, not as the threat she'd feared for 5 years, but as the father Linnea was growing to love, the co-parent who had proven surprisingly reliable and respectful of boundaries. And perhaps, most unexpectedly, as a man who had genuinely changed in fundamental ways during their years apart. "When do you head back to New York?" she asked as Linnea carried her hot chocolate to bed, extracting promises from both parents to check on her in 15 minutes. Monday morning. Everett leaned against the counter, his posture more relaxed than she'd ever remembered from their marriage. "Board meeting Tuesday that can't be rescheduled. But I'll be back Thursday evening for Linnea's science club presentation. You don't have to come to every school event, you know? The custody agreement only specifies." "I want to," he interrupted gently. "Not because of legal obligations or parental competition, but because I've missed too much already. Because every science presentation, every art project, every chess tournament matters to her, so it matters to me." The simple sincerity of his statement, free from the calculated charm he'd once deployed so effectively, caught Astrid off guard. This was not the Everett Keller who had planned to frame her for corporate espionage, who had viewed their daughter as a useful business asset. This was someone both familiar and unfamiliar, with Everett's face, voice, and mannerisms, but a soul that seemed fundamentally transformed. "You really have changed," she said quietly, the observation escaping before she could censor it. Yes. No elaborate justification, no strategic humility, just simple acknowledgement of an evident truth. Though not enough, I suspect, to ever fully deserve your forgiveness. Forgiveness isn't about deserving. Astrid found herself saying, echoing words Orion had once shared during her darkest days in Cedar Cove. It's about choosing to release the past so it doesn't control your future. Wise perspective. Everett studied her face, something like hope in his expression. Have you made that choice, Astrid? To release the past? The question hung between them, weighted with implications that extended beyond their co-parenting arrangement, beyond their carefully negotiated boundaries. For 5 years, Astrid had defined herself in opposition to Everett, as the woman who had escaped his betrayal, who had protected their daughter from his manipulation, who had built a life despite his attempts to destroy her. But the man standing before her now, humbled by loss, transformed by reflection, consistently proving his commitment to Linnea's well-being, was he still the enemy she needed protection from? Or could he become something else entirely, a genuine co-parent, perhaps even eventually a friend? I'm working on it, she answered honestly, one day at a time. The smile that crossed his face, unguarded, genuine, without strategic calculation, belonged to a version of Everett she'd glimpsed only rarely during their marriage. A man capable of real emotion, of vulnerability, of connection beyond business advantage. That's all any of us can do, he said simply. Work on it, one day at a time. As they moved to check on Linnea, finding her already asleep with an open book beside her, Astrid felt something shift within her, not forgiveness exactly, not yet, but perhaps the beginning of its possibility. A willingness to observe the man Everett was becoming rather than forever defining him by the man he had been. For Linnea's sake, certainly. For the co-parenting relationship they needed to maintain through years of childhood and adolescence ahead. But perhaps also for her own sake, for the freedom that might come from releasing the grip of past betrayal, from recognizing that people could indeed change in fundamental ways when life stripped away their illusions and forced them to confront their deepest failings. 1 year after Everett had reappeared in their lives, Astrid stood on the beach near their Cedar Cove cottage, watching Linnea and her father fly a kite they had designed together, a complex, dragon-shaped creation that combined Everett's engineering precision with Linnea's artistic vision. The autumn wind caught their laughter, carrying it back to where Astrid stood with Orion, whose friendship had been an anchor through all the changes of the past year. They've come a long way, the elderly bookseller observed, his kind eyes tracking the pair as they adjusted string tension to gain better control of their airborne creation. Both of them. Yes, Astrid agreed, unable to deny the evidence before her. Linnea's happier than I've ever seen her, more confident, more settled in who she is. And her father? Has he continued to prove himself trustworthy? That. Astrid considered the question, weighing the year's evidence with the cautious assessment she'd maintained despite growing evidence of Everett's transformation. Remarkably so. Every promise kept. Every boundary respected. Every decision centered on Linnea's well-being rather than his own preferences or convenience. And the corporate titan? Has he returned to his former priorities, now that he's secured a relationship with his daughter? That's the most surprising part. Astrid shook her head slightly, still adjusting to this unexpected reality. He's restructured Keller Technologies completely, stepped back from daily operations to focus on ethical innovation guidelines, established a foundation for children separated from parents by corporate or political conflicts. It's like he's systematically addressing every aspect of his former self that led to our original crisis. Orion nodded thoughtfully. And you? How are you navigating this new reality? The question gave Astrid pause. For so long, she had defined herself in opposition to Everett, as survivor, as protector, as the woman who had escaped his manipulation. How did she define herself now, when the villain of her story had transformed into someone who could no longer play that role? I'm learning, she said finally, that people can change more fundamentally than I believed possible. That forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting or excusing past wrongs, but choosing not to let them determine future possibilities. That co-parenting with someone who has genuinely evolved can actually enrich Linnea's life rather than threatening it. And your own life? Has that been enriched as well? Before Astrid could answer, Linnea came running toward them, cheeks flushed with excitement. Mom, we got it to do a double spiral. Come see. She grabbed Astrid's hand, pulling her toward where Everett stood with the kite string, his expression a mixture of paternal pride and something more complex as he watched them approach. The family they had become was nothing like the one Astrid had once imagined, during those early days of her marriage when she believed in Everett's carefully constructed facade of devotion. It was messier, more complicated, built on hard truths and painful growth rather than convenient illusions. But it was also, paradoxically, more genuine than anything they had shared before, grounded in reality rather than manipulation, in earned trust rather than assumed loyalty. As she took her place beside Everett, accepting the kite string he offered with a smile that held no calculation, only shared joy in their daughter's delight, Astrid realized that Orion's question had answered itself. Yes, her life had been enriched, not despite the painful journey of the past 6 years, but because of it. Because sometimes the most authentic connections emerge only after pretense has been stripped away, after fundamental truths have been confronted, after people have been broken open and remade by consequence and choice. Watch this, Everett said, showing her how to angle the string to create the spiral pattern that had so delighted Linnea. Their fingers brushed in the exchange, a casual contact that no longer carried the weight of past betrayal, only the simple recognition of shared purpose in this moment. Above them, the dragon kite danced against the autumn sky, its movements both free and guided, wild yet controlled. Much like the family below, learning day by day how to navigate the complex balance between independence and connection, between caution and trust, between the painful past and the possible future. Not perfect, not complete, not without lingering shadows and occasional doubt, but real. And in that reality, hard-won, honestly earned, daily chosen, lay a strength that no pretense could ever provide. Have you ever discovered that someone you thought you knew completely was capable of profound change? That the person who once hurt you most deeply could evolve into someone worthy of cautious trust? If you've experienced the complicated journey of rebuilding after betrayal, hit that like button and subscribe for more stories about the courage it takes to face difficult truths. Comment below about whether you believe people can truly change their fundamental nature, or if Astrid should maintain her protective barriers despite Everett's apparent transformation. Some journeys of forgiveness take us places we never expected to go, but sometimes that's exactly where we need to be.